How's it going, Interblops? Un here once again, and I must tender my apologies for a bit of a gap since the last video. I was all set to get started on a new LP of a PS3 game, except whoops, my PS3 died. So yeah, hasty change in plans. Let's do Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja Master. As Plan Bs go, though, Shinobi 3 is by no means a bad one. Released in 1993 for the Genesis, it is a direct descendant of The Revenge of Shinobi, previously LP'd on this very channel. Between Revenge and 3, the series also added Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi, a very good game in its own right that I may also cover one of these days. But Shadow Dancer was strongly arcade-influenced, as opposed to the more console-style Revenge. As such, Sega doesn't seem to have considered Shadow Dancer part of the main Shinobi series, which would explain why this is 3 rather than 4. At any rate, 3 resurrects the core mechanics of Revenge nearly unchanged, adds a few new moves, and generally takes the route of same again, only bigger, better, more. The result is easily the best of the classic Shinobis, arguably the best in the entire series, and a rock-solid action game by any measure. And I've talked too long as usual, so let's play a thing. Shadows. He is stronger than steel and moves faster than a whirlwind. Sometimes he hides in mud. Other times he transforms his shape like an ever-changing cloud. Although his fighting spirit burns like fire, his mind is as calm as still water. Violation of the commandments. Should Shinobi fail before completing the mission, he will disappear before the dawn and vanish forever. Keep this knowledge in your heart and mind. From the secret manual of Oboro Ninjutsu. So, we either succeed or die pretty much? Well, that's about par for the course for a video game. Anyway, here's our main man, Joe Musashi, same character as in the original Shinobi and Revenge of Shinobi, and depending on which regional version you talk about, sometimes Shadow Dancer. But I'll go more into that if I ever cover that game. For now, let's look at our options. For difficulty, we've got a fairly standard range, going from easy to expert. I'll stick with a default of normal as usual, and we can choose our number of starting shurikens anywhere from 0 to 70. Now you may recall in Revenge of Shinobi, you could set that to 0, wait a while, and the zeros would knit themselves together into an infinity symbol, giving you unlimited shurikens. That doesn't quite work in this game, but we can just go down to sound effect, change that to shuriken, head back up, and Bob's your uncle. But we are not going to cheat today. However, I am going to give myself the legal maximum of 70, because running out of shurikens is a very bad time. Alright, let's get down to business. And our first stage is Zeed's Resurrection. You may recall Neo-Zeed was the crime organization we took down in Revenge of Shinobi, and it looks like they're back. Now our basic moves, we can of course throw our shurikens high and low. Got a standard jump, and a double jump. And if we attack while double jumping, we throw out 8 shurikens, which is very handy, but can cause you to run out kind of quickly. And if you hold down the attack button, you can block, and slowly move while blocking. This stands in contrast to Revenge, in which you could only block after you had collected a POW pickup. As for new moves, if you jump, press down and attack, you get this very handy dive kick. And you can tap twice to the left or right in order to run, and if you attack while running, you get this sword slash, which does lots of damage and gives you a few iframes during the hop. Magic is exactly the same as in Revenge. Ikuzuchi lets you take a few hits without receiving any damage. Karyu damages everything on the screen. Fushin improves your jump height. And Mijin will actually kill you, but you'll be able to resume exactly where you left off, whereas dying normally causes you to go back to the last checkpoint. So if you're low on life and think you're about to die, never a bad idea to use it. There are also a couple new environmental techniques, but we'll address those when they come up. Just like in Revenge, you get power-ups from these crates. The single shuriken there gives you another 5. There's our first POW, which also, just like Revenge, changes your shurikens to fireballs, which do triple damage, changes your block to a sword block, which is functionally identical, and changes your melee attack to a sword attack. And the cross shuriken pickup there gives you 20. Another thing about the POW is that if you get hit you lose it, but you take no damage, so it also saves you from one hit. So you can see how, as I said in my typically long-winded intro, this is pretty much Revenge of Shinobi and then some. And that's a pretty good base to build on, because Revenge of Shinobi was quite good, especially for a launch title. And we're about to see another returning element from Revenge, which is bombs. Sometimes crates will have a bomb in them instead of power-ups, and those will explode after 5 seconds if you get too close to them, or new in this game, if you hit them with a shuriken. And of course you will take damage and get knocked back if you're hit by the blast radius. Shinobi 3 eases you in real lightly. The game actually has a very slow difficulty curve and doesn't get particularly difficult until you're pretty close to the end, at which point it does a swift 180 and shows you the true face of its hatred. Anyway, these guys blocking the passage will block with their sword until they shoot out an energy wave allowing you to hit them, and normally it takes 3 hits to bring them down, but we still have our POW, so it only takes 1. Now another thing that is like Revenge of Shinobi is that Shinobi 3's levels are divided into several sub-stages, but unlike Revenge, they often have a mid-boss at the end of them. And this feller here just does a boomerang thing with his energy wave, and normally takes 6 hits, but again we have our POW, so it only takes 2. And on we go to the second part of Stage 1, which is going to introduce us to those new environmental techniques I mentioned. And the first of them we will be using right here. We can hang on ceilings and go hand to hand across them. It doesn't have to be anything special like a rope or anything like that, you can do it with just about any ceiling. I like the way Shinobi 3 uses this level to introduce you to these new mobility skills. Like back there's a long pit you have to cross, but the rope looks like something you should be able to grab onto, so you jump up and try it, and lo and behold you can. And here we have a high wall we have to get over, which teaches us to use the triangle jump. Very easy to execute, you just press up against the wall and press jump, and it works at any point in your jump. And right there, you can try it as many times as you need to and get the hang of it. And of course, later in the game, we'll have much trickier wall jumping sequences with increasingly dire penalties for failure, but early on it just presents you with an obstacle that you need the new skill to get past, but it doesn't penalize you for fiddling around with it a little and getting used to it. Good design, Shinobi 3, full marks. Now that we've been initiated into all the new mechanics for Shinobi 3, we'll have a good amount of time to come to grips with them and eventually master them. The next several levels do gradually get somewhat more difficult, but as I mentioned, this game doesn't really pour on the challenge until the last 2 levels, at which point it's going to expect us to do some Spider-Man shit. For right now, though, it's gonna be smooth sailing. We are just about done with level 1 and ready to take on our first proper boss fight. And our first proper boss is going to be this 4-armed samurai dude, who will normally block attacks with his swords, but if you pop him just before or after he takes a swing at you, you will get your hit in and he will back off a little bit and charge at you with the spear. All you have to do is jump over that, and that's really all there is to his pattern. Right there I was trying to do something I occasionally do for some extra style points, which is get him to drop his guard and then try and hit him with one of the running sword slashes. That does a lot more damage than a shuriken, but it's also a really easy way to get yourself hit a lot, so I really think I should stop showboating and do this properly. Much better. Couple more passes ought to do it. Pretty simple boss and pretty easy pattern, and if you still have a POW when you get to him, you can end this fight really quickly. But unfortunately I lost mine a while back. Nevertheless, we are done, and we get a nice detailed picture of us administering the killing blow. No ninjutsu is pretty self-explanatory, but I have no idea how you get the Shinobi technical or special bonuses. If you have any idea, please clue me in, cause I would love to know. All that aside, Round 2, Secret Entry, seems to take place in some kind of facility, but first we have to get to the facility, and that means horse time! This is one of a couple of auto-scrolling segments in Shinobi 3, and our dive kick is replaced with a stomp of the mighty hooves. Not terribly useful, but I'll probably use it from time to time just to keep things interesting. and hopefully not jump over too many power-ups for no good reason. Stomp! Every now and then we'll get that flashing exclamation point to give us a warning of a coming obstacle. They're just little fences, easy to jump over. And we get a little warning of whenever enemies are going to pop out at us, because we get to see them jump off the kite in the background. Neat little touch. Really, this game is full of neat little touches. And there was our very first one up. I'm taking every opportunity I can to stockpile extra lives in the early going, because I'm gonna need as many as I can get my hands on for those last 2 levels. And now it's time for another mid-boss. We've got another kite inhabitant, this time it's an orange one, and he'll throw down spears, which you have to jump over once they stick in the ground. Then he'll do a flying kick at you from behind, and you can pop a shuriken or 2 into his back, which will remove some of his body doubles. Another very simple pattern, nothing too challenging about it. He's just got a couple of doubles left on him. We get those off, and one last hit will do him in. And there we go. We've arrived at the base and must sadly part ways with our awesome ninja horse, but at least right there I used the iframes on the running slash to hop through some bullets, and that's pretty cool. The running slash and the dive kick are pretty useful in this section, because they give you a relatively safe way to deal with the machine gun and boomerang guys. And in the case of the boomerang guys, the running slash will go right through their shields. Kinda got sucker shot from off screen there and already lost my new pal, but such is life. And here you see the first example of a move I will be using and abusing throughout the game. Pogoing on multiple people with the dive kick is a pretty good way of dealing damage while keeping yourself out of trouble. The crawl spaces here will have rifle guys come out, and you can easily pop them with a shuriken, but for style points I prefer to use the running slash. And even if your timing is slightly off, you'll often be able to use the iframes on the hop to go through their first bullet. Like so. Of course, that doesn't help if you fumble the input and fail to do the run correctly. But no matter, on to bigger and better things. You can actually grab onto the crossbeams there, which may not be immediately obvious. Situationally useful, but it can occasionally pull your ass out of the fire. This is generally a pretty leisurely section. You have plenty of time to see and get ready for the soldiers before you're actually on the same horizontal plane as them. A couple of places, though, there will be a platform that spans most of the width of the screen, like right there, and you do have to make sure you don't get crushed against the auto-scrolling of the elevator, because that will, unsurprisingly, kill you dead. Because the auto-scrolling is rather slow, though, this is generally not too difficult to avoid. And there's the first case of a mandatory triangle jump section, where you are going to die if you don't do it correctly, but at this point you've had enough time to practice, I think. And there's the end of the stage. And here's what I consider to be the least inspired boss design in the game, both visually and mechanically. It's just this little cybernetic brain in a jar thing that flits around and occasionally unleashes one of a few attacks on you, like those lasers. or these cluster bombs, which blow up after a few seconds or whenever the boss takes a hit, whichever comes first. You can destroy them with your shurikens like so, though, which makes life considerably easier. It has one other attack in which it makes the background go all wavy and reverses your controls. Rather annoying, but it didn't seem to want to use that this time. It does a little damage if it bumps into you, which can happen pretty easily due to its erratic movements, but really no big deal. Don't know what else to say about this guy, he's just kind of a boring boss. Fortunately though, he can't take too much punishment, so we'll be able to bring him down pretty quickly and move on to more interesting things. He can sometimes be a pain to hit, but that is that, and we can kick the crap out of his corpse. I still don't know what I'm doing to get that technical bonus. And next up is round 3, Body Weapon. And given the name and all that pink goo all over the walls, you might think this is going to be something kind of icky. And you'd be right. Yep, it would appear that Neo-Zed has been taking a page out of the Umbrella Pharmaceuticals playbook, set up a little bioweapons lab for themselves. This is actually a pretty easy level. In fact, I would say it's a little easier than the previous one, but it does at least have some interesting visuals. I like the way the lights flicker out sometimes and you can just see the green glow of the tubes in the background. And that would be me fumbling the controller and accidentally hitting the ninjutsu button. So kinda blew myself up for no good reason there. Hopefully that won't come back to bite me toward the late part of the game when I need all the lives I can get my hands on. Nah, I don't think one life's gonna be a make-or-break situation. Just a little embarrassing. As is that bit of clumsiness there. Mind the bouncing loogies, kids. There are really just a few enemy types here. The bouncing loogies guys, the flying brain things, and there'll be one more bouncing brain kind of enemy that we'll see in a little while, and that's really about all there is here. You do have to be careful because sometimes the flying brain guys will hide off screen just a little bit above your visibility range. And ready to bust out of the tubes here, like you all saw coming, I'm sure. We have the last enemy of the area, the little bouncing brain guys. Just like the flying ones and the loogie guys, they're just one-hit enemies, no big deal to destroy. Really nothing on par here with the rifle guys or the boomerang guys from the last level, which is why I consider this one a little bit easier, even if it is a little more complicated in its layout. As long as you proceed slowly, take things one at a time, drop them as they come, really nothing to worry about. Oh, fool me twice, can't get fooled again. Well, actually there is going to be one more enemy in a little while, but I'm not entirely sure whether to actually call it an enemy or an environmental hazard. Oh, and what I did there, if you hold up or down on the controller for a few seconds, the screen will scroll a short distance in that direction, which can be useful to see if there's a platform below you to drop down onto, or if anything threatening above you, or stuff like that. The green goo below me here is not instant death or anything like that, it just does a little damage if you fall into it, no big deal. And the spark things here, going around the conveyor belts, are what I was talking about when I wasn't quite sure whether they were meant to be enemies or environmental hazards. Like, they just look like balls of electricity, but you can destroy them and they even bleed, so who knows. And I wouldn't think kicking them would be a very good idea, but I guess Joe has some very well-insulated greaves. And when we make our way over this conveyor belt ceiling, we will be just about ready for the mid-boss. Oh, mind where you land there, Joe. What I just picked up was an extra ninjutsu charge. And here we have the mid-boss, which isn't really a mid-boss so much as a short barrage of enemies before the next section of the level. The jars drop down and break whenever you either hit them or they fall into the goo, and they've all just got the little hopping brain guys inside. Not a big deal at all. You have to work against the conveyor belt, but that's really not particularly difficult. And that's going to bring us to this really gross stretch of real estate, where you will gradually sink into the spongy organic matter of the ground. Fortunately, you do stop sinking about knee-deep, and that'll actually be helpful against the eventual boss. The only thing we have to worry about in the foreground are those purple antlion things, but as you can clearly see, there's something to worry about in the background. A huge ugly fucker who tries to train a crosshair on you. And you do want to stay ahead of that crosshair, because if he gets it on you, you will be blasted with a laser from the background, and there's nothing you can do about it. Given the sewer pipe in the background and the absence of any lab equipment, I like to think this is where they dump all the failed experiments and the leftover biohazardous waste, but that's just my little Shinobi 3 headcanon. Also, if you can't get on the right height to hit the antlions with your shurikens, the dive kick will override their hitbox nicely. That's a very safe way of dealing with them. Dodging the crosshair tends to be most difficult when it first appears, because it spawns pretty close to the center of the screen, roughly where you are. But once you get ahead of it, it's not too hard to stay that way. And guess what we're about to be fighting? Yep, it's the big ugly fucker from the background. Every time you hit him, he'll try and grab you with his hand, and you can't hit him again until the hand goes back down. Also, you have to be careful that you don't get hit by the hand when he retracts it. Periodically, he'll suck you toward him while charging his laser, but that's where sinking into the ground a bit is actually helpful, because if you're fully on top of the ground, you can't duck under the beam, but let yourself sink a little bit and you can crouch and slip right under it. And of course, that's the same laser he would turn on you if he got the crosshair on you in the previous part of the stage. And because I was able to keep my POW, the triple damage brings him down nice and quick. And that's the end of the body weapon. Technical and special bonus. I still have no idea what I'm doing to get those. At any rate, on to round 4, Destruction, which looks to take place in some kind of oil field or refinery. But once again, first we have to travel there. Ever see that movie Surf Ninjas? Yeah, neither did I. It's nice to see that Joe isn't a strict traditionalist when it comes to his tools of ninjutsu, though. And the warning signs here will let you know there's a jump ahead, and if you can ramp over those with the correct timing, there will usually be a few power-ups for you to snag and a nice graceful arc. Much like with the kite ninjas in the horse level, you can watch the background here to see when the enemies are coming. When the hoverbike guys speed ahead, they'll come from the front, dropping mines on you like so. But if they fall back like this guy, they're going to come from behind with machine guns. And then I like to stun on their head a little bit. Whirlwind, the BGM for this stage, seems to generally be considered the standout track of the game, and that is a sentiment with which I agree completely. I'll try and remember to put a couple links in the descriptions for the original music and for a remix of it I particularly like by Mega 5. Oh, a little too slow on the re-jump there. But the 1-up more than makes up for it. Alright, the 3 robot duders in the background here. 2 of them are just going to take off, and we'll have to deal with those later. But one of the small ones is going to stick around and be our mini-boss. Over the course of his attack cycle, he'll drop mines on you. Sometimes he'll shield himself, and I do like the way the shurikens get turned away when he has a shield up. And he has those three-way shot bursts as well. With the triple shot bursts, it's generally easier to kind of bait them in one direction than dodge in the other, as opposed to actually trying to slip between the shots. The timing can be a little tricky, but that's really about all he has going for him. And that's going to bring us to the refinery, so we're back on foot. This level is a little more freeform than ones we've previously seen. There are a couple of different paths, high and low, that you can take. Generally, I would say the lower path is the safer one, because then you always have a clear view of the ground. Which means shit like that is less likely to happen. And if you will cast your eyes to top center, you will see one of the unfortunate consequences of death in Shinobi 3, because my lovely stockpile of 350 shurikens is gone. Yep, if you die by any method other than blowing yourself up with ninjutsu, your shuriken count gets reset. And that could be a good thing if you're running really low, but if you have a nice generous stockpile like I did there, it all goes away. Anywho, as I was saying, I consider the lower paths through this level to be a little safer, because you always have a clear view of the ground, and there are death pits to worry about, as I inadvertently demonstrated. But the higher paths do tend to be a little more generous with items. And it's just kind of fun to swing around on the pipes. Enemy presence through this level is generally not too bad, except there is one enemy type we'll be introduced to shortly that is the bane of my existence. There we are, the Batwing motherfuckers. They are back from Revenge of Shinobi, and they are pretty much the Medusa heads of this game. The game always seems to know where to situate them so they can knock you into a pit or off a platform or fun stuff like that. See, that almost went very wrong. The guys hanging out under the pipes, on the other hand, are no big deal. It's fairly rare that I manage to get a flying melee attack off, so it's always kind of satisfying when it happens. Kind of a dickish place to put a bomb. Motherfucking bat ninjas. Fortunately, we passed a checkpoint not too far back, so we don't have to lose too much progress. Let's try not to run into steam vents, though. Not this time, my friend. 8 shurikens is a small price to pay for peace of mind. And here we've got a high structure in our way, so we'll have to go back a little ways in order to go forward. Little shake up in the level design, I appreciate that. And now if you drop down here between the structures, make sure you grab onto the pipes as you fall. A little bit of daring over the death pit gets you an extra ninjutsu stock. which I probably won't use because I'm going for the no ninjutsu bonus, but hey. And after we collect the 2 crates on top of the pipe, we'll be all ready for the boss fight. And it's surfing time again, as we take on the largest of the 3 robot things that we saw toward the end of the previous surfing section. Wonder whatever happened to the other little one. Anyway, it's got a cannon up front, missiles in the pod on its back, and from time to time it'll rear back and just charge at you. Oh, and also a fuck-off big laser. Said laser and the charge attack are 2 reasons I like to stay on top of it a fair amount during the first phase. After you do some damage and blow some parts off, it'll take to the air, retrieve those parts into a new configuration, and start popping you with cannon shots at an angle, which I find considerably harder to dodge. In general, I don't do too great a job with this phase of the boss. But fortunately, the game will periodically throw you shuriken refills and health pickups, so that helps you outlast it. Jeez, yeah, I'm really making a dog's breakfast out of this. But once you've knocked off the cannon and the claw thing, there's not too much left to do. Alright, it was an extremely ugly win, but it's still a win. And I do quite like that illustration. And that, I think, is where we're going to leave off for today. I thank you all very much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time when we take on an electric demon. Till then, this is Un, signing off. We at I Played a Thing would like to thank our very generous patrons, including Justin Carpenter, Nolden, Zangamarth, Charlie Dunst, Anonymous Benefactor, John Madigan, Sanguine Games, Misha Van Doren, Frank Grizzy, Tim J., Lolo De Puzzlo, Joshua C. Ritchie, Jared C. Rice, Darren Chow, Sonic Rose, EX Potemkin, Alicia Goranson, Argyle Jelly, Mechasaurus, DG Jono, Doug Russell, August Fortnite, Patrick Bellinger, and welcome to the top tier, Rob Lyons. Thanks also go out to the rest of our very kind contributors, and to all commenters, subscribers, and watchers. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next episode.